Hi guys, the webinar will start shortly. We'll just give it a few minutes for everybody to join the session. Thank you. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll begin the session. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Nikki Sowden, and before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping notes. Number 1, all phone lines are on mute to avoid interruptions during the broadcast. Number 2, our session today will include a live Q&A session. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the questions and chat panel located to the bottom of your screen. And finally, the recording will be available on our websites within the next few business days. For those of you that may not be familiar with Riskonnect, I'd like to provide a brief introduction. Riskonnect is a leading integrated risk management software solution provider. Our technology empowers organizations with the ability to anticipate, manage, and respond in real time to strategic and operational risks across the extended enterprise. In July 2022, Riskonnect announced the acquisition of Castellan to better fulfill the ultimate goal of bringing risk under one roof. Together, we will help you build integrated risk management functions with end-to-end visibility and true enterprise resilience through software, consulting, and managed services. More than 2,500 customers across 6 continents use our unique risk correlation technology to gain previously unattainable insights that deliver better business outcomes. Riskonnect has more than 1,000 risk management experts in the Americas, Europe, and Asia. To learn more, visit riskonnect.com. And now please join me in welcoming our 2 presenters for today's broadcast. Paul Cutler, MBCI. Paul is the EMEA Delivery Manager for Riskonnect. Paul has over 40 years' experience within the IT service industry, working in New Zealand, Australia, and the United Kingdom. He has a background in business continuity and resiliency, and his experience includes uplifting a client's resiliency and technical recovery capability following a cyber attack, and supporting clients to operationalize their business continuity solutions. Next, we have Andrew Morkot, MBCI. Andrew is a UK-based principal managed services consultant at Riskonnect, with 30 years' experience in the resilience field across government, tech, and big pharma sectors. This includes 15 years leading business continuity programs in UK FTSE 100 businesses. He specialises in helping organisations build practical business continuity and crisis management programs that align with operational resilience, organisational strategy, and customer needs. I will now hand you over to Paul and Andrew to begin today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. So the plan today, the objective today, really welcome everybody and thank you for joining today's session. Today we're going to be driving into a timely question. Are BIAs and BCPs still relevant in a world where risks are changing faster than ever? As organizations face faster changes, more complex threat, the question really is not about just having a plan, is whether the plan is actually still effective. Andrew and I will look at both sides of the question and the value they bring, the criticism they face, and we'll discuss how they need to evolve. We're going to look at the goals mainly are going to be understanding the core functions of BIAs, BCPs, examine traditional approaches, where they succeed and where they sort of fall, explore some real-world cases for success and failed continuity planning, look at some modern alternatives, and determine the tools that can remain effective throughout modernization. Next slide, please, Nikki. So the agenda is pretty much what the plan is, as you can see what's written on the tin there. That is what we're going to go and try and get through today. So let's get started. So next slide, please, Nikki. Introduction. So really, some quick definitions to baseline ourselves. Andrew, did you want to kind of do sorry to throw you in first one, but just give some baselines on the first, where are we at a ground level?
Yeah, essentially. Thank you, Paul. So essentially business impact analysis. So if you think about understanding and examining each element of the business from a departmental perspective, understanding what it is that you do, how quickly something needs to be restored if lost, all of those dependencies that you have either internally within the business or externally with third parties such as suppliers, things like IT, facilities, people, technology, data, anything that you rely on that if lost would have an impact upon you, so that we can basically build an end-to-end picture of a what-if scenario, so that we understand when something's lost, what needs to be recovered, and in what order. So obviously business impact analysis is usually a conversation that's done with someone like myself and a departmental leader. Moving on to business continuity plans. Paul, do you want me to carry on, or do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, you carry on. You carry on in first one.
Okay, business continuity plans. Essentially, if you think about how we respond to an incident, we've got evacuation plans, sort of rendezvous points, etc. And we've also got things like incident response plans. So if something like a critical event happened, how you respond as an organization. Neither of those really fall into what a business continuity plan is about. So a business continuity plan is all about organization or departmental resilience and a response to a business disruption. So it's after the event, when it's things like evacuation or critical response. And it is about, and a business continuity plan is about how a piece of the business responds and maintains its functionality so that it can be relied on within the business.
So thank you, Andrew. So So historically, they have been central to the business resilience program, and they're still, and they still are today, as we have more risk coming in, and that is the core of our discussion today. So next slide, please, Nikki. So really, the case, the case for, we're going to do a case for, a case against, and then try and look at the future. So the BIA or BCP provide this is the reason for a really good structured, tested approach to continuity. It helps, as Andrew said, helps identify critical functions, identifies dependencies, and the BCPs help prioritize recovery efforts. And together they form the backbone of the traditional continuity planning. Despite criticism, these tools still offer significant value. They do provide structure, they provide prioritization, and they support compliance. Andrew, any more thoughts on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about a structured approach to continuity, it enables essentially for you to develop and have these arguments in advance. So when we think about what we need to recover and things like important business services, everybody is important, but not everybody is urgent from a recovery point of view. So it enables you to have that bun fight in advance to understand from a corporate perspective what needs to be recovered. So it's a structured and it's tested, and obviously, we have ISO standards that support the rationale for having business impact analysis and business continuity plans. And it's a no stress time to be doing this analysis, and we're not doing it on the fly in an emergency.
Thanks, Andrew. Next slide, please, Nikki, which is a good segue. Oh, there you go. Into some proven value. So to Andrew's point, Cisco, very large network connectivity manager. COVID-19 forced all of pretty much everything globally, the global offices to close. However, because Cisco had been developing for years planning, because of H1N1 planning, it was a near seamless shift to remote work. Critical functions already been identified, mapped in BIAs, operations, support, product development carried on with minimal risk. And that really came to, their plans were built for scale, and they proved through, as Andrew said earlier, having done this in quiet time, when it hits the fan, they can move forward quickly with it. And the other one is, for example, as well, I mean, they're not going to save the world, but in 2019, Capital One experienced a major data breach affecting over 100 million customers. They had very well developed plans, instant response. They were allowed to isolate the breach very, very quickly. Their BIAs identified the critical assets. They created an informed response prioritization, and operations again continued with minimum disruption. And with the integration of cyber resilience within the BIAs and BCP, it was a fast recovery and a managed recovery, not just switching everything over, and then a reduced reputational damage to that company, which was a good thing. And similar with when NotPetya hit TNT as well. Although it was a very slow recovery, because they had plans, they already understand their third parties, they understand their supply chain, so they were able to close gaps and move forward quickly. Have you got any other examples, or unless I've given too many out, Andrew?
No, I mean, they make perfect sense. So obviously, nobody is pretending that a business continuity plan, like Paul says, is going to save you when a black swan, as we call it, event occurs. A lot of businesses had pandemic response plans, and when COVID-19 hit us back in 2020, they didn't have all of the answers, but certainly companies that had COVID plans or pandemic influenza plans were able to start a response more quickly, and ultimately had a better response and a better outcome than organizations that were making it up, in the first few weeks of response. And, peak companies like Norsk Hydro, they use business impact analysis to triage and stabilize quickly, after the ransomware attack that they've had. And if you contrast that with what's happened with M&S, sadly, they were hit with a cyber event, and it just goes to show you that, and we'll talk about it later, it just goes to show you that even the best plans can leave you short if you experience an event that you weren't expecting. So they've had large physical crises in the past that they have had business continuity plans for, but again, business continuity plans won't save you in the event of something that is a black swan event.
Yeah. So a lot of that's the reasons why. So just to finish off, so next slide, please, Nikki. So one other, I suppose, intangible benefit is the cultural and strategic benefits of having BIAs and plans. I mean, they do more than just outline and identify critical dependencies. They help build a culture of preparedness. They help reinforce resilience as strategic priority, and they help boost stakeholder confidence. I mean, beyond documentation, they help promote cross-functional collaboration by highlighting interdepartmental dependencies. They reduce, foster teamwork, break down silo, improve overall response. So they help create that risk-aware, not risk-averse culture. And having the documentation, having the plans, having an understanding of how everything knits together gives the employees, the employer, the stakeholders, the shareholders, everyone confidence that when you do, it's a when, not a maybe. You are ready for it. Anything else before the next slide, Andrew?
Yeah, so if we think about customer and stakeholder confidence, as BC managers, we understand that, our supplier base and our critical customers are very interested to know how resilient we are as an organization, and you are as organizations, to business disruption. And actually, in a lot of instances I've seen in the past, having business continuity plans in place enable you to be able to be in markets, MOD, the healthcare industry. There are markets that you are not allowed to enter unless you have robust business continuity plans in place, and you might be required to be ISO certified. So stakeholders require us, or require you, to have business continuity plans in place. And obviously the financial services in the UK, PRA FCA, Bank of England regulations are being put in place to make sure that there is operational and organizational resilience in place to make sure the markets and critical customers aren't affected. So it's becoming more and more important. And when we talk about a proactive risk culture, it enables us to talk to each other internally across silos. So IT, risk, governance, business continuity are able to share and understand what their vulnerabilities, what their commonalities are, where there are overlaps, and where there are critical dependencies that everybody is going to be affected by when they fail. So as I say, supporting business as usual under stress is what it's about. So when an event occurs, we need to make sure that the elements of the business that aren't affected can continue to operate to keep the business alive, whilst the stressed elements are responding. And it's important to have a coherent approach to how we separate the two and make sure that the crisis or the incident response or the business continuity response can happen whilst other parts of the business are carrying on business as usual.
Thanks, Andrew. And just to answer Mark's question, are the examples available for public consumption? Yeah, the research I did, I just literally went online and did the research looking for, BCPs, BIAs that have failed and ones that were successful. So this is available on the web. Look under Google. Right, next slide, please, Nikki. So on the positive, the Ciscos of the world, the TNTs of the world that managed to recover, albeit slowly. There are publicly, there are ones out there that I think maybe some of us have all been involved in. For example, where it's fallen short, Maersk Shipping got hit by a NotPetya attack back in 2017, I think. It wiped out almost 50,000 laptops. It was a major failure, which I think they acknowledged, or the CEO acknowledged, where they have failed to account for a rapid IT outage, as a catastrophic black swan event, and there was no clear plan for rebuilding everything. They were lucky in that part of their DNSAD, I believe, was sitting in a data center in Ghana, in Africa, that had a power outage. So that escaped purely by good luck. Someone went and got those drives, brought it back, and started rebuilding from scratch. So, the key takeaway really for them was, a BCP without tested IT recovery procedures is a false safety net. It must, and this is a must for global entities. Similar, Southwest Airlines, they had a similar one back in 2022 where, they had a major failure with 16,000 cancelled flights, caused chaos, because they had a very outdated scheduling system, and the BCP plans didn't lack contingency. So they hadn't actually been scaled and brought up to date. And probably one very close to home was the TSB IT migration crisis. So anyone who banked with TSB back in 2018 may recall that you couldn't access your accounts for weeks and weeks and weeks. The BIAs really didn't, reflect the importance of the platform continuity. They weren't stress tested for a rollback if they had to roll back. The CEO actually lost his job, and the bank had a huge hit on its reputation. So, even major changes like system migrations need planning from a both technical and a customer focus. So, these examples have highlighted that traditional BCPs and BA, often can't keep up with change. They're fairly static, get outdated quickly, and they miss new forms of digital operational risk. So, in many cases, it is not aligned, in the case of TSB, to the way organizations operate today. Andrew, anything you want to add to that one? Have I given enough color to that?
No, I think it's important to recognise that, as we are now in an era of fast-moving technology and artificial intelligence, obviously, there's now an expectation, amongst all industries, that organizations are able to respond far more quickly and in a more agile way than they ever have before. And, when we talk about traditional BIAs and BCPs, the old-fashioned, if you like, clunky way of doing this, without online or SaaS-based or AI-supported systems, are becoming very, very old-fashioned. So plans now need to be able to respond to these kind of hybrid cyber/physical events, or things like misinformation, etc. So if you look at things like SolarWinds, blindsided everybody. But it was the ability to respond quickly and communicate with customers that was vitally important. And obviously, old-fashioned plans that are, even done on things like Microsoft Word and printed and updated annually are entirely out of date almost as soon as they are, developed and printed. So there, as I say, there's an expectation to do it far more quickly, and the companies that aren't doing it now will need to be doing it in a far more agile way going forward.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew. And just before we move to the next slide, Mark had another question. You say that companies that conducted formal BIAs and developed plans experience better outcomes. Is there objective research available that supports this contention? Off the top of my head, no. However, my best guess is the BCI will have, I'm speaking on their behalf, they would have probably done quite a bit of research. So if you're a member of the BCI, jump on their website. There will probably be academic research, objective research in there that may answer that question. But off the top of my head, I can't just pull something out now. But odds on, BCI, very, very good organization, may have already done this. And Ross, to your question, coming up on the next slide. So next slide, please, Nikki. So legacy BA and BCP practical challenges, and this is to the question that we just had there from Ross. It's they are traditionally, and I use the term very loosely, traditionally, BIAs and BCTs do have limitations. I mean, they're static, they get out data quickly, they're quite heavily resource heavy to maintain. I mean, Andrew and I do this for a job, running BA workshops, getting plans built up, driving customers to make sure everything's up to date. And that they can be very quickly misaligned to fast-moving cyber operational threats, but also sometimes they're actually viewed as a compliance checklist rather than operational tool, which you're always in a bad situation if this is only about ticking a box. That's not the name of the game here. Some have poor integration with IT, as we saw back with TSB, third-party risks, and many are really resource intensive. We've got there are people out there, our customers who still, for whatever reason, print their BCPs out. Literally as soon as you've cut down that tree to print that document, it's out of date the minute you hit print. So it's more, this is not about compliance. It needs to be seen as actionable tools that we need to use. We'll come to you in a sec, Ruben. So Andrew, do you want to add some more and maybe answer Ruben's question, which was how deep and complex must a BIA be? If you could.
I'll answer Ruben's question to begin. How deep and complex should a BI? Did you say BIA? I can't see the chat.
Yeah, BIA. Yeah.
I think essentially a business impact analysis is there to gather information to build a business continuity plan so that we understand what your key vulnerabilities are, what your key dependencies are, and how quickly you need to respond. So the information that we gather needs to go into a business or needs to feed a business continuity plan. So you stop at a point where you have enough information to be able to develop a business continuity plan that gives you those answers. So things like a supplier dependency. Do you need to have someone's contact details, email address, telephone number, and hours of business? It depends. It depends on whether or not that is it relevant in the business continuity plan for you. When you pick a BCP up or you access it online, does that plan give you the information that you need at 1 a.m. when a disruption occurs? If it doesn't, you haven't gone deep enough.
Thanks, Andrew.
So one of the things that's really important about understanding about BIA and BCP practical challenges is culturally they're not very interesting, and the reason that people aren't engaged. So when you come to almost like an audit, you come to update a business continuity plan with a member of the organization. It's seen as a compliance, as it says on screen, seen as a compliance checkbox. It's not interesting, whereas obviously going forward and making people more responsible and accountable for their own business continuity response gets people either pull or push more involved in the business continuity response. So it becomes far more interesting, far more culturally embedded. And when we think about, and I've been there, one man band, one person, one lady band, doing business continuity plan. It's one plan, one effort to deliver an almost immediately out of date business continuity plan. What we need to do is get people engaged within the business so that each department and each area has a business continuity champion and has somebody who's responsible for their own business continuity. So the old way of doing it, the way I've done it for a very long time before, before technology took over, is a hugely inefficient.
Yeah, agreed. And it's the BC person almost becomes a salesman or a saleswoman, having to drive, why am I doing this, and sell the dream. So it's an interesting one. Next slide, please, Nikki. Sorry about the weird rotations. It's just what we got back. So, right. The rise of the modern alternative. I looked at this heading when I wrote it and thought, oh, it sounds a bit, like a movie theme, but it's not really. On a positive note, there are new approaches emerging. Where we're looking at agile resilience model. There's a lot more real-time risk monitoring out there. There's some really fantastic scenario-based simulations and automated impact analysis. So there is technology similar. There's better recording for BIAs now. We use a product called Gong, which is just so good at providing the analysis and what's been said, so nothing's missed. So having to sit with pen and paper, it can become conversational now, which is rather than just a Q&A session. It becomes, and you can gather all information. You can listen to what you haven't heard, which is good. So a lot of organizations, these cross-functional simulations, automatic impact analysis tools, software and automations, creating that speed and flexibility to look at, it's still fundamentally the same, business impact analysis, business continuity plan. However, how you're getting that information, is becoming a lot more dynamic, where you can actually see things, happening as you go along. So you're getting feeds from, various outsourcing areas. Andrew, anybody you've seen out there from a
Well, certainly. I mean, I'm working with an organization that is running risk assessment continuously using things like threat intelligence and supply chain data and metrics, so they can continuously understand their risks and adapt from a business as usual, business response perspective, can actually adapt to problems that are either on the horizon or are affecting them essentially in real time. Organizations run real-time simulations on things like massive supply chain failure, or stress test product delivery under various disruption scenarios. So they're using AI and AI technology to run AI-driven risk modeling, for real-time threat detection, automated incident response, so they can use AI for exactly that. Do impact prediction and simulation, so they can build a virtual digital twin of their organization, so they can understand and do it in a safe environment exactly what happens to their organization if they lose a critical supply chain element, or they lose another part of the business. They can do what's called dynamic resource prioritization, so they can essentially, again, either for real or in a simulation, they can triage and point resources very quickly and almost in real time, reorganize the business to be far more efficient and prioritize those operational tasks that need to be done. So, and not to be too dramatic, I guess, if we're not engaging with AI and engaging with these modern methods and technologies, we're behind. So in 3 or 4 years' time, we need to have been doing this for a while. So, as I say, these modern alternatives and these modern ways of doing it are becoming the norm now, as opposed to the exception.
Thanks, Andrew. So I think I guess next slide, please, Nick, if you could. And this goes to Ross's question about, is the limitation of traditional BIAs, BCPs more about information being input or systems being provided? And I think also too, there was another question in here, which was from, I think it was in this one, I can't remember where I saw it. Someone had a comment about using a spreadsheet instead of everything in an air-gapped laptop. So we know hopefully we've sold the dream that BIAs and BCP, that structure, that model still works, but it needs to be brought up to spec, needs to be improved. So the answer again is, traditional forms of BIAs and BCPs may no longer be relevant alone, but modernized versions with integrated broader resilience efforts become very relevant. So for example, you need to automate. You need to be using software, not spreadsheets, but actual software that can provide the information so decisions can be made quickly. That software needs to be able to be pulling information in from, and this is where they become dynamic, not just sit down, have a workshop, have the software connected via, an API or however you want to do it, to be pulling information from the golden sources of HR, from the company's CMDB, from supplier information. So as new servers get moved and brought in, deployed, whatever, that information is automatically moved across and brought in as a dependency within your business continuity tool. So your BIAs are constantly being updated with new information coming in. Similar with HR, staff leave, people move. So as people move around, change roles, those contacts, those people who could be having actionable tasks on them within plans, is always up to date. Similar phone numbers coming in, so you can notify a lot more quickly if there's problems happening. And we're getting a lot more third-party risk management work as well now, where as new suppliers come on, making sure that supplier is mapped within the BIA, and is also providing your supplier procurement team with the correct information about what's their plan, so you understand third party, fourth party, fifth party. All of that feeds in to your business continuity program, because to Andrew's earlier point at the beginning, when it all goes bad, it's the plan that will help you recover. So you need to know what's the latest IT I need to recover. In a case of a cyber attack, how do we actually contain, how do we then eradicate? How do we then start recovering on clean? In the case of HR, have we got the right people? Who do we need to contact? Where are they? Are they available? In the case of COVID, that was very important. In the case of third party, if a third party is a strategic alternative workaround where you lose one third party, can I roll to a next? Someone in a place of decision, in the case of the UK here and gold, silver, bronze team, needs to know who can we flick distribution to. Things like that are looking more along the lines of a resilient by design mindset, by having the light, still using the structure of a BIA, still using the structure of a plan, but making sure the feeds are giving you the most up-to-date. Forget about waiting once a year. Tell me what's changed now. Keep it up to date. Andrew, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I was just going to see if I could get a couple of questions answered that are
Oh yeah, please. Thank you, sir.
pouring into the chat. I'm just looking at the ones I can see on screen.
Are you looking under Q&A?
Yeah, I'm looking up the Q&A. So Glenn said, as I see it, the current approach is to move from being reactive to being proactive, i.e. build resilience into BAU processes. So absolutely, business continuity management is all about understanding what your vulnerabilities are, doing the, if you like, the impact and likelihood measurements to understand where your risks are and where you need to prioritize your response. So making sure that that baked in resilience and those mitigations are put in place as part of your preparedness. And then, of course, that will help you when it comes to mitigating after the impact event has happened. So absolutely, business impact analysis is trying to understand the importance of the elements of your business and what you need to make sure that you're either hardening or making sure that it can't fail. So it's essentially, and another question here from David, explain the difference between third party, fourth party, and fifth party. So third party is someone you rely on. So let's just say I buy a widget from XYZ widget manufacturers. They are a third party to me. If, for instance, they are relying on organizations that supply them with the steel to make those widgets, they're a fourth party. So the steel comes from the fourth party to the third party. The third party makes the widget, sends it to me. I'm the consumer. Fifth party is once removed again. So maybe the ore manufacturer who makes who supplies the steel manufacturer who makes the widgets, who sends it to me. Third, fourth, fifth, and you can keep and you can keep going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Because I mean, I worked for a big four consultancy firm for a number of years, and we worked on a couple of big cyber incidents. And the procurement chap there said quite offhand, the only guarantee you have from a third party is an invoice. So you need to understand, if that third party is, and we had a customer up north who still printed checks. that third party who did the check printing relied on a check machine to print. Problem is, no one knew about it until the check machine broke down. And all of a sudden it was like, well, hold on, how are we going to print checks? So it's when it hit, that's the problem. So that's kind of the key thing. Andrew, I'm just going, I don't know if you are as well, going through the questions. So I'm just going, there was a question right at the beginning here from Natalie. What are your thoughts on single entity versus separate BIA BCP? Throw you in the spot. Is that all right? Sorry.
I'm not sure I understand single entity. You need to explain. Apologies.
Okay, so Natalie, if you could put a bit more in. Coming down, any thoughts on Zoe? I use Excel, was able to access all my resources offline on an air-gapped laptop. How did companies manage IT system failure with CrowdStrike failure as an example? To me, that isn't a black swan, as it's, oops, where'd it go? Sorry, someone's typed something on as I was typing. Sorry, I'm just going to find, there we go. And if not, but when for this type of event. So your thoughts on working in an air-gapped laptop, Andrew?
Well, of course, if you have the information available to you, as you say, on an air-gapped laptop, that is absolutely adequate in the sense that you need the information you need in the moment you need it. As I said, the chat keeps disappearing on me as well. Apologies. Where's it gone?
Yeah, it's moving around every time someone types something. So we might just take one more question after this then. Do you want to come back to that? Or just keep going forward?
Yeah, I'll come back to it.
Yeah. It just, yeah, sorry, attendees listening. It's weird when people type that everything just moves up very quickly and we can't keep up with it. So next slide, please, Nikki, if you could. So that is weird when it slows left to right, doesn't it? So a balanced perspective, this is, there are, as we've covered already, there are, positives for how having planning has worked. There is also negatives when people have got plans. So there is swings and roundabouts, and we need to kind of work out somewhere in between is the Goldilocks, the sweet spot we need to have. So, as we evaluate, or you evaluate your BAs and their relevance, it's important to resist the urge to just go out there and go either obsolete or perfect. They're valuable tools, but only when they're dynamic and they're integrated and they're updated regularly. I mean, back in the day, it was an annual thing to review the plans. And you've got to think now, does that mean nothing happened for the other 364 days of the year? It's a bit of a strange concept, but it's kind of what we did. So we must try and move from static documents to more adaptive frameworks, real-time decision making. We need to be, maybe don't ditch them, but maybe reinvent them. I think, so the goals to move from static to living. And as I mentioned earlier, making sure that, all the changes and dependencies that are being fed from elsewhere in the organization, because recovery is a team sport. So we need to know where everything is and what we need to do. Similar, making sure that, when recovery plans are put in place, everyone knows their role. Everyone's been through this before. Similar to Cisco. Cisco had done this before. So they kind of, for H1N1, so they kind of knew where that. And when I worked in Australia, we had the same thing. Avion Flu had already kind of thought about it. So none of it was a surprise. And Andrew, what are your thoughts on a more balanced rather than just rip it all up and throw it in the bin approach?
Well, we've got to start from somewhere. So, organizations that have a suite of legacy documents, that contain really good but perhaps out-of-date information, absolutely don't throw them away. When it comes to developing new, more evolved or more agile solutions, that's the core material that, is really important. And not only that, the people who provided that information are the core people that you need to keep involved, as opposed to trashing what you had and, and wheeling in a new agile AI-driven model. So they absolutely need to be used, but developed. Evolution's the key. As I say, if we're not running to get ahead, we're way behind. So, organizations and regulators are expecting more. Customers are expecting more. They're expecting more of an agile response. And if we're not doing it, our competitors absolutely are. So we need to make sure that we evolve, and it says there to stay relevant. We need to make sure that our responses are agile and able to, respond in the kind of fast pace that they need to now. Hybrid approaches may offer a best path forward. I think whatever works, for organizations, and I don't think anybody is saying you need to just do it this way. Whatever works for you and whatever the path or whatever the journey is for each individual organization is for them or for you. But I think it's massively important to be making sure that you are adopting or adapting to the new methodologies and the new systems that are available.
Thanks, Andrew. And Natalie's come back. So for you, Andrew, single entity would be combined BIA, BCP in one record, a combined version.
Well, yes, it's not really a normal way of doing it. You could do that. You could say, here is my information. And if you do something like a business impact analysis and say, I need this application and here is my strategy for when it is lost, those things are sometimes split in other words to, this is the application that I need and here is my recovery time objective, and then the strategies for response are delivered over into the business continuity plan. So those two documents are dynamically or physically connected. Whether or not they're separated out, you need to make sure that when you pick up a business continuity plan, it isn't drowned in data that you don't need in that moment. So the reason for moving it from a BIA to a BCP is it distills it and gives you the recognized or understood picture of that part of the business, and it's all about response. It's not about the data you've gathered. So it is essentially your playbook of response as opposed to a text on why you think you need this thing. So I think they're far more efficient if they're separated, because business continuity plans need to be as short as they can possibly be, whilst without losing functionality.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. And there's been a few in here too about adaptive BAs being accessed during cyber attacks, and back to that question about the laptop or the airlock. I mean, there are so many offline, and the definition of offline just means not on your production or your backup system. So for example, if you've got your business continuity program in AWS or within Azure, for argument's sake, or even Google or any of the Chinese cloud environments, that is, the air gap is making sure it's not part of your production environment. So that's the key here, because as Maersk found out, if you hit production, all you have to do is hit backup as well, and both are gone down the tube. So it is, use cloud. The cloud is everywhere now. It's accessible from your mobile device. As long as it's away from your production environment, you should be safe. Is kind of the logic of airlocking it out. So there was another question here, and I'm just sort of trying to go through them. So it was from an anonymous. I do agree that BIAs, BCPs can become very quickly out of date. But how do you culturally move from a once a year review to embed? Oh God, it moved on me. Sorry. Why did it do that? How do you move to an embedded into BAU? Also, what would be your recommendation around policy requirements for reviewing BCP BAs? We are struggling with asking for anything more than once a year, since BCP is an add-on to people's roles. Now that to me is what we hear every day. It's we're noticing more and more BC people are getting to putting it crudely, to the top table, but it's still, oh, not you again. Would you agree with that, Andrew?
Yeah, and there is an element of that. If you continually ask, then your voice will become quieter, because people will, people will stop listening if you're continually asking them to update their BCP. I think when it comes to cultural change, believe it or not, there are, if you've got an organization of 1,000 people, there are 10 people there who really like and enjoy and are invested in business continuity management. And if you can find one or two of those within each part of the business, it becomes much more easy to do. So I think it's really important that organizations try to identify keen individuals within the business who will help them with their business continuity management, and push the idea of baked-in resilience within the organization. And more than once a year, you can do things like staggered business continuity tests. So you could have a quarterly BC test, where all of the learnings from that BC test are not automatically, but are from the post-incident or post-exercise review, fed back into the business continuity plan. So that's a quarterly update on an annual plan. So there are ways of, obviously there are ways of doing it, but I think it's more important that you get people who either want to do it, or you build in business continuity planning into people's core objectives. So it's difficult to do, but I think it's really effective when done.
Yeah, agreed. And I guess as well is try and link it into real operational risks. Embed updates as natural checkpoints, for example, and shift the mindset from a compliance task to business resilience. You'll start to build more like continuous and embedded culture of preparedness with that. It's kind of is where it comes from for that. So I'm just conscious of time, Andrew. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Nikki, while I'm trying to make my mouse close the Q&A. Thank you. So, in conclusion, and we're at quarter to the hour, so 15 minutes to go. So, BIAs and BCPs, I believe, still remain an essential tool in identifying critical functions and planning responses. They do provide the structure, the clarity, the roadmap. Yeah, but there is a catch. They are static. They're a one and done plan. They need to be kept up to date, with unpredictable outcomes, which mean they need to be being fed with the latest information so they're always relevant. You can have your annual review, but what you should be doing is not, reviewing everything. You should just be making sure, managing by exception. Is this correct? Do you still use these applications? Have you still waiting for the third party to provide you fourth party information? Do you have an SLA? So all the core data is there. You're not starting from a blank piece of paper. So you're kind of moving forward. And when well used, both BAs and plans strengthen resilience. They support regulatory compliance. You're looking at DORA where they need to see plans as part of the article. You're enhancing coordination as early between teams. But when misused and neglected, they do become irrelevant, dusty checklists that when it matters most, which is a concern. So, I'm a great believer in structure. Structure gives us confidence, where agility makes us capable. So together they can actually create resilience that is real and not just theoretical. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that?
So yeah, absolutely. So our business continuity plan is still relevant? Well, at the moment, yes. What will especially large organizations be doing in 5 years' time with new technologies? It's unclear. I think they will still need to gather information about their vulnerabilities and dependencies and core activities. They will still need to do that until regulation changes. Our regulatory overlords will require that we have business continuity plans in place. So they're not going away in the short term because they are a regulatory requirement. But to the point, they only are relevant if they on screen if they're modernized. So yes, they're not going anywhere soon. They will change, and I think they will change rapidly. But depending on the size of the organization, how deep and how far that change to a dynamic, agile, threat-based model is unknown.
Thanks, Andrew. So there's a couple of people have asked the question on the comments and the notes about will these slides be shared? Nikki will cover that off at the end when we hand back to her. So next slide, please, Nikki. Well, they're going up now we're going a different direction. Okay, so the main takeaways really are that BIAs and BCPs are still relevant, but they need to evolve. They need to be keep up to pace. They can't be static and compliance generated. They need to be. So I'm just getting rid of it. The chat keeps popping up in front of me, which is blocking what I'm reading. And it relies, as Andrew said a little while ago, about real-time intelligence, cross-functional ownership, and resilience by design. So making sure you are, you're using the plans and you're writing the BIAs for the purpose for which they're intended to improve the organization and the people's resiliency if you can. It's about continuous resilience, not just recovery readiness. And strategic investment. I mean, you need to be, although we still see, we're a software company, we have business continuity software, but we look and we still see customers with a lot of information on spreadsheets, some pretty sexy spreadsheets, but are just very complicated spreadsheets or even Word documents. So getting it off paper or Word and into a almost three-dimensional model, which allows you to see your dependency and your risk better, is what you need. You can then have automatic feeds coming in and data sets coming in that are giving you the latest and most up-to-date information. So scenarios can be put in from threat intelligence software. That can all sit in a cloud or an off production off backup system, completely isolated from your organization's infrastructure. So you can feed one way and go through an air gap. Even if the business go down, you can still recover. Simple as that. Andrew, any other thoughts on some takeaways before we go to
Yeah, and that answers
response?
Zoe's question, doesn't it? You know, how did organizations respond to the CrowdStrike incident when they lost their key technologies? Some didn't react well. Some organizations were really blindsided by CrowdStrike. And as Paul says, separated business continuity solutions enable you to be separated from your core infrastructure and have those plans in an entirely separate, unaffected part of the business. So, and to the point there, I think organizations need to be more able to respond real time to incidents as they occur with things like threat intelligence and the ability to absorb and analyze and plan and respond with information as it's coming, as it's coming in through the hosepipe, and not using old-fashioned business continuity plans. So it's becoming a far more agile model.
Thank you. Next slide and last slide, please, Nikki. And then we'll just get to some questions. So some action steps, really. And those who were expecting a silver bullet from this presentation, I assume you're a bit disappointed. All Andrew and I can do is really put it out there that these are the things where it's worked well. This is where it hasn't worked well. Here's some ideas how to improve. But if anything, one of the things we were trying to do is look at, you've got to modernize your approach for agility. You've got to integrate business continuity and business. I know that's a struggle and it's a hard tagline when you are, just, oh no, I've got to do another review again. You want to create yourself a resilience first culture. You want to leverage technology. There's so much technology out there. It's amazing just by looking out there. Rethink the scope and the frequency, and really it's about changing the mindset. Now, are you ready, to rethink your approach? That's kind of it. So, Andrew, any last thoughts on action steps? And then I'll open up some Q&A questions here. If I can,
John, just to
pressure on me.
just to echo your point, Paul. This is not a bad mark for anyone when it comes to if people are using old school, if you like, business continuity plans and approaches. This is really more of a call to action, to ensure that you are looking at the new technologies that are available and where you can integrating them. And I think one of the key takeaways for me is making sure that you are working with the business to drive business continuity down into those departments and make sure that we move away from this lone business continuity manager or small team doing all of the work, because we have the technology now, we have the AI, and we have the systems to be able to make it more interesting and more engaging and certainly easier to do for other people to be involved.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. And I'm just going to start going through some questions now. So I'll try and get to as many as I can. There was one at the bottom here. In your opinion, thanks, Nikki. In your opinion, which tool would you recommend to use for the BC program, Archer, ServiceNow, etc.? You would have noticed this webinar has been sponsored by Riskonnect. Andrew and I both work for Riskonnect. So my recommendation would be, in my opinion and my view, would be go to the Riskonnect website and have a look at the business continuity software that's on there. That was a pitch, but you asked a question. So looking at the few others now, I'm just trying to scroll through without moving too much, Andrew. So here we go. Is BCMS part of operational resilience, or is it the other way around? I love this question.
So operational and organizational resilience, are BC done properly? So if you think about operational resilience, we're looking at the impact all the way up to the market, or all the way up to the customer, your critical customer, all the way down to the component elements. So if we were doing business continuity properly, in the new way of thinking, we're looking all the way to the customer, all the way to the market, down into the components. So the BCMS is, if you like, the holistic umbrella, and the operational and organizational resilience fall under them. So I think it's fairly semantic, but the BCMS is the approach or the umbrella, and these other elements fall underneath it. You could say GRC, or you could say the enterprise risk is the larger umbrella. It's a difficult one, but I think that's probably the answer I'd give.
Okay, thank you. And another one here from an anonymous person. Don't know why some are anonymous, some are named, but anyway, we still don't see supplier openly sharing the RTO RPOs or are we bringing some industry standard or maybe regulation that's mandated? Your thoughts? Well, we live in an open market, and you have the choice to choose your suppliers and the relationship you have with your suppliers. So you can, and a lot of organizations now, and I think it's being pushed quite heavily by DORA if you're in the EU regulated market, that you must have your supplier must be able to provide service level agreements. They must be able to provide what they're going to do if they go out of business. We have, you should ask for more, so that you can build a trusting and long-term relationship with the supplier. So if you've got a good relationship, your procurement team should be able to get that information. However, they're running a business, you're running a business. So there is a little bit of, you've got to be, conscious of, where you sit in the bigger, are you a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? You need to kind of work that out. Another one here was back to Zoe again. What if your system is compromised? Do you have your plans backed up in case your PC is offline? Why wouldn't you just have your plans on your mobile device? That would, to me, would be, everyone's got their mobile in their pocket now. I mean, I've got, teenage children and they live on their mobile. So there's no reason you couldn't have it mobile and have it available. So you could be pinged if you're out and about somewhere with a problem. You can then start your crisis. You can then find the plans that relate to you all from your mobile device. And you don't need Wi-Fi for that. You can run on the standard 4G, 5G network for that information as well. Just not conscious of time, Andrew. Just trying to find another one. The thing's just moving around. It's a bit of a weird one, this one, isn't it? So,
Just whilst looking, Paul,
sorry, Andrew.
I just wanted to mention something briefly about that RTO and RPO question around the key suppliers. Obviously, everybody's now using one or two or three huge multinational organizations, and I think it's one of the things that's really important is obviously having a robust SLA so that you can agree in advance what those recoverability numbers are, but also understanding where you are in the pecking order of when all of their customers are scrambling for a response. It's really important to be able to know exactly how important you are to them. So if you're a small business, you're with everybody else. If you're a large business, you might be able to get some sort of prioritized, sort of tiered response.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think the last question, because we're just conscious of time, is from Maria. The EU's DORA regulation demands greater granularity in the business impact analysis as it requires RTO, RPO for specific functions. This often means expanding the scope of the BIA in many cases. What's your recommendation? Absolutely. Your BIA should have your important process, your important functions. You should know how much data you can lose through your RPO. You need to know what your recovery time is for your RTO. You need to understand your maximum tolerable downtime. And all of that needs to get fed from the activities within the BIA based on dependencies. So, for example, you may be looking at a Microsoft Office recovery RTO of 4 hours. That is not going to happen because you've got to remember you've got to reload all your T0, your tier 1 infrastructure first. You've got to get your hardware back before you even start. So a lot of these are markers, but it's up to the BC professional to negotiate, even if you like, between what the business needs as requested and what IT or the cloud provider can actually provide in reality. And somewhere between there is a balance against cost and money, because you want greater RPOs and RTOs, it costs money. So it's just a matter of finding that. Again, it's a balancing act. But the good thing is using BIAs and BCPs, you can see where the questions are. You can see the gaps. That's another advantage of them. Andrew, I think we are done. Nikki, with 2 minutes to go, can I hand back to you and can you talk about what to do with the presentation, etc., please?
Of course. Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
So thank you, Paul. Now, before we finish our session, I'd like to bring your attention to the new 2025 New Generation of Risk Survey, which is now open. We'd like to invite you to participate in this 7-minute survey, which looks at your biggest risks, what's changing in the industry, and what has you most concerned about the future. By participating, you can receive an advanced copy of the results. Please scan the QR code or visit riskonnect.com for more information. It's now time to wrap up today's webinar, but before we do, I'd just like to take the time for a few thank yous. I'd like to start with a big thank you to today's fantastic presenters, Paul and Andrew, for their time and expertise this afternoon. Great job, guys. Thank you also to the audience for attending today's webinar. The recording and slides will be available on the BCI website in the next few business days, so keep an eye out for that. And don't forget to visit our resource centre on the Riskonnect website, www.riskonnect.com, for more informative content and engaging webinar recordings. Riskonnect are committed to creating resources that help organisations successfully improve awareness and ultimately the need for business continuity and resilience. So all that leaves me to say is that I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank
And
you.
apologies, we didn't get through all the questions. We tried our best. Take care. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.